Hi, card making friends. It's Sandi here for Picket Studios. Today I'm going to be sharing the August release Slimline products from Picket Studios. I'm also going to use one of the new dies and make a Slimline card. Here's a quick sneak peek at today's card, and it's created with the Slimline Our Town die set that is part of the August release. First up, here's some of the new additions to the Slimline die family. There are a couple of new Slimline Die Cut Inserts this month, the Angel and the Santa, and they die cut out this fabulous insert into the top of your Slimline cards. Great additions to the very popular and growing collection of the Slimline Die Cutting Insert system, and you'll see all of the ones that we currently have available. I'm just doing a quick run through here. Aren't they fabulous? Love them. They make super easy cards too. Next we have two Slimline stencils, the horizontal English brick wall, and we have a vertical one. Now we have this great horizontal one, and the new Slimline Die Cut flower stencil, which you can also use both ways. There are three new Slimline dies this month. Our Town with the Village and the Santa. Next, Joy to the World. It's an oversized word die. And then finally, the Merry Blessings, another oversized word die. I used the Joy to the World die on this card. I layered it 4 times to really make it pop up. I'm not sure if you can see that in the layering there. And then the artwork is the beautiful poinsettias. Another new stamp and die combo this month, and it's called a Christmas flower. It's just gorgeous. Obviously, I cut it 3 times and added it to the card. And for that gold inlaid piece on the card, I created that with the April release Slimline scalloped frame of dies. There's one in there that I'm pointing to that cuts out that inlay, and then you just pop it into your cards. So we also have the Slimline collection. This is the nested rectangles and word dies, and this is the Slimline die cutting system. There are 2 new repeating stamps from the Building Backgrounds collection this month. You can stamp these horizontally or vertically, lining up the edge to continue the pattern. Here I've used the Medley of Fall collection to stamp my card front on this Slimline card. I stamped it 3 times. You could also turn it this way and stamp it 3 times. And I also wanted to point out that many of our word topper dies fit across the Slimline cards as well. You'll see that I've got prayer here, and it fits beautifully. Okay, let's get on to making the card. I'm going to be using both pieces of the Slimline Our Town die set today. And I also wanted to point out that this design works perfectly on an A2 size card as well, but I'm going to show you how to make it a slimline. So I've got 3 die cuts here, a light blue, a teal blue, and a purple. My card base I have cut from the Slimline Basics system, and I have used the larger of the 2 background dies because I wanted to make sure that Santa and the reindeer was going to fit across the top on an angle, and I'm going to be putting a little moon behind it. So I placed my die cut over it to see which one fit the best. Next, I'm going to be using some masking paper. This is Gina K masking paper, and the circle die from that Slimline die set, and this is going to create my moon. So I need to peel off the backing from this thing, which is really hard when you don't have fingernails. It takes a minute for me to get this going here. But you're going to peel off that backing, and you can actually use this a few times. So save your backing, and you can put it back on top of your piece and use it again later. And again, I'm auditioning where I want Santa and the reindeer to go so that I can put my mask down, and I don't like it centered, I like it offset, so I'm a little off to the left on purpose. Okay, and we're going to be doing some ink blending with the life-changing brushes and distressed oxide inks. And I'm using tumbled glass, broken china, mermaid lagoon, and chipped sapphire. For this blending technique, it's actually more dramatic for the sky if you don't blend the colors completely together and make it perfect. I have found that just adding a little bit of ink all over the place and not worrying if there's white spots, because you're going to do 4 layers of color. By the time you're finished, there aren't going to be any white spots, but you're going to get different depths of the blue in your background, and it's going to be, as I said, extremely dramatic. You'll notice I'm not worrying about the bottom of the paper. My little village is going to cover that, so I didn't bother inking it. So I'm just doing a rough cover of the lightest color, which is the tumbled glass, and then I'm going to flip over to the broken china. And yes, I'm using the same brush because it's a darker blue, so I'm not worrying about changing brushes or cleaning it. And when I want to go back to the lighter one, I just rub my brush a few times on my scrap paper there in the background, and I'm good to go. So again, I'm worrying a little bit more about the edges. I want the edges a little bit darker, and I want the bottom behind the village to be a little bit darker. So you see I'm adding a little bit more in there. Now I'm using my dark blue brush, and I'm changing over to the Mermaid Lagoon. And again, I'm going around the edges in particular to make them darker, because it's lighter around the background of the moon, right? So I don't want a whole bunch of black around there. And adding some darker color at the bottom, flipping it around and doing the other side. And you see that I'm starting to get some nice depth of color by adding all four of these on top of each other. But you're also kind of getting the swirl. And there's going to be some splatter for the snow, so it's going to look very, very dramatic and very, very true by the time we get all of that on there. Okay, we've moved on to chipped sapphire, and be careful with this one. It's really, really dark, so go gently. You'll see at the end here, that great big blotch right underneath my left finger. I ended up going back over top of it with the tumbled glass just to lighten it up a little bit. And that's one of the things that's nice about distressed oxide inks, is they do cover the previous color if you want to. You can cover right over top of it and lighten it right back up. So they're extremely forgiving, and probably why I play with them so much. So I decided it was a little bit dark. You see I've come back in with my tumbled glass, and I'm just lightening it up a little bit. And I'm almost happy. A little bit more on that side where that dark piece was. There we go. And adding a little bit more at the bottom because, again, I want it darker behind my village. Okay, it's time to make it snow. I've got a little bit of white paint, and I'm just going to pull it on a drop onto one of my acrylic blocks. I'm using my spritzer to add a little bit of water to it, and then I'm just going to blend it out with my paintbrush. And I practice the splatter right there on the acrylic to make sure that I have got it diluted enough. And I don't like really, really big splatters, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. And I want to point something out too when I start to splatter. When you do it this way, you're going to end up with large blobs, which you want some of. But if you tap it over top of the finger on your other hand, you actually end up with smaller ones. So I like a combination of the two, and that's why I do both techniques on my card. Okay, now we're going to get sticky fingers. You'll see that I have backed my little village with black because I want black in the windows because, hey, it's nighttime. Now we are going to use the new Paper Glitz Sparkle to really get things going around here. This stuff is a new medium with an unbelievable sparkle to it. It's a combination of glitter and mica mixed with a spreadable glaze. And I'm just setting some paper towel up over on the left-hand side of my workstation because I want a place to put the wet pieces as I finish glazing them. And I'm going to start with my moon. So I'm removing my mask and I'm laying it down on my work surface. You want to open the Paper Glitz, and first thing you need to do is stir it because quite often the mica and the glitter are going to sink to the bottom, so you need to blend it back in together. And I am using my fine tipped spatula for today's technique because I need the point to get around the edges of that circle of my moon. So I'm just putting a very small amount of it onto the back of my spatula, and I'm just going to zoom in here for you so that you get a little look at it. Isn't that stuff yummy? I haven't tasted it yet, honest. It just looks yummy. Okay, so scooping up a tiny little bit at a time because this stuff spreads really, really well, and a little goes a really long way. So I'm just loading up a bunch so that I can start, and I'm going to move my paper at the same time as I move my spatula, getting right up to the edge of that moon with this beautiful sparkle, and it's going to give me my fabulous shimmery winter moon. Now, because this is a little bit thicker than I normally would put through a stencil, this is also going to take a little bit longer to dry. So if you're doing it, you want to do, go do the laundry or make it the last thing at night before you go to bed, because this actually took about 45 minutes to dry. So I'm just getting around there, trying to stay within that circle. And this stuff is also self-leveling. So originally I thought, oh great, I can have these little craters and everything in my moon. Well, no you can't, because it levels itself out. And you'll see that I drop it on the table a couple of times at the end just to flatten it out a little bit as well. But it is the perfect shimmer for a moon. And I have a little bit too much going on there. And that's probably why it took so long to dry. I could have used half as much on this. But hey, I wanted the glimmer. I'm just getting around to the final edge there. Moving some more stuff from the middle. And I've got a couple of spots where there's holes. So then you just tap it down on your work surface, and that will help to flatten it out. And then again, I'm going to set it over on the left-hand side and just let it dry. And we're going to move on to Icing Up the Village. So, of course, it's the middle of winter. It's December. Santa's coming. It's Christmas Eve. And so there's going to be frost all over the roofs of all the houses in the village. And this Paper Glitz Sparkle is perfect. And I'm going to use a very delicate tool, my finger, to add this to the front of it. This I didn't want to use a paintbrush. I don't have any really cheap paintbrushes. I didn't want to use one of my good watercolor brushes with this. Even though it's water soluble, it has mica and glitter in it. So I decided that my finger was the best alternative. And what I'm doing is I'm using what's left over on my spatula just to go across this first one. And I'm also digging a little bit out. I'm trying to be dainty. That doesn't last very long. And you just want to put a smooth coat all the way across. And make sure that you have all the spots, because if you miss a spot, it's going to be very dull compared to the shimmer that you're getting from the finished product. Okay, so you're going to do that to all three of them. And as you can see, I've given up with the spatula. Now I'm just putting my finger in the pot and getting it going. Make sure you're protecting your work surface too, because it is sticky. And what I do, especially like I'm doing this video, I have a container of water just off camera that I'm dumping all this stuff into so that it stays damp and I can clean it up later. And especially if you're using a stencil, make sure you clean it right away or put it in a bucket of water until you're finished. Okay, so there's the light blue one done. And I'm just making sure that I don't have any dry spots anywhere on it. And you see that most of my windows are covered up. I do come back in with some tweezers and open those up a little bit, but I don't open them completely because, again, I want the frost on the windows. Okay, so it really shows up on this one. And here I come. I'm cleaning out some of those little window wells. And just enough for the black to show through just a little bit. And these took about, 15, 20 minutes to dry. They didn't take that long. But it's a great time to go and, move the wash to the dryer, feed the dog, take the garbage out, clean up your stamp room. Okay, so my little moon is dry finally. Isn't it pretty? I'm trying to get it to show up on the camera. This is so glittery, it's unbelievable. And then we've got our village. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be stacking these at the bottom. And you want to offset the buildings because, of course, they're all in the same place with the die, right? But you've got enough room with the Slimline die because it's so long that you can straddle these back and forth so that it looks like it's a bunch of different buildings instead of all the same. So I'm just getting a rough idea of where everything's going to go because I need to make a cut. So this is going to be my first cut, and I do it without gluing them down. I'm just going to bring my scissors in, and you don't want to throw away the pieces. I'm going to show you after I get these attached what I do with the rest of the pieces. So I'm just doing a rough cut here. We're going to do a trim at the end once we get it all glued to the card. So no need to be exact. And I'm going to use my Barely Glue for this because it's got that beautiful fine tip on it. And I'm only going to put glue on the portion, or I'm going to try and only put glue on the portion that's going to stick to the buildings behind it. So you see that I just put it on the top, If you put it on the bottom, you're going to glue it to your work surface. And this stuff does take a couple of seconds to dry, but it sticks really, really well. So you will be picking up some of your paper with it too. So adding the purple layer to the teal layer. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the pale blue layer. And I have the pale blue layer in front, and then I get progressively dark because that's kind of the way it would be with a village as you were working your way up a hill. So again, adding a little bit of glue to the top section of the blue piece. And gluing it down. My fingers, of course, are very sticky. That's the fun of doing this kind of thing though, right? I love getting sticky fingers. Okay, and then you want to stick a couple of acrylic blocks on top of this just to let it dry so that it dries flat and sticks really well together. And we have these pieces left over, and they're kind of rubbery, which is kind of cool. It really does a cool thing to the paper. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to dry, I am going to glue my Santa and reindeer over my moon. And again, the Barely glue with a very fine tip comes in super handy for this. This glue also dries clear, so it's awesome. If you happen to squirt a little bit out when it's dry, you're not going to see it. Okay, and I'm just angling it. They're on a very steep curve here. Obviously, they're leaving. They've already left all the parcels. Okay, and again, I'm going to add an acrylic block to the top of that just to make sure that it dries nice and flat for me. So back to my village, which is now dry. I have all these extra pieces and I want to use them up. And also because I've got so much real estate on the bottom of my slimline card, I've got room to make more layers on my village. And so I'm going to add glue to the bottom front of these pieces because they're going in behind the other ones. And I'm layering them up. And I'm worrying more about the village and where those pieces are, and I'm not worrying about the edge because remember, I've got about a ½ inch on either side to move around. So I'm not worrying about that. See what I do right here is there's half a building there. So I'm snipping that half a building off so that it lines up with the other side of the nice purple building. And then I decide, hey, why don't I just overlap the two because they're the same building? And so that's what I do. And again, I'm making sure that I'm putting the glue on the right spot in the front on these ones and at the top on the back on that corner one that's going to overlap. And just tucking that in behind. And you got a little bit of room to move. You know, you got a couple of seconds before that glue sets, so you got some wiggle room there. And it's a little bit slower to dry when it's on top of the glitz that's on our paper here because it's a little bit on the slippery side, so it's not as porous. So again, I'm cutting part of a building off because I don't want half a building in my background. And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue and add that last piece. And then again, I'm going to stick an acrylic block on top of that and let it dry before I attach it to my card. Okay, all my pieces are done. They're all dry. It's ready. It's time to start putting the card together. I'm going to be using score tape to add this on. It's extra strong and it's going to hold all the layers in place, which is going to make it look professional and finished once we get it all cut down properly. So I'm putting lots across because again, I have exceeded the width of the card. So I got to make sure that wherever my edge ends up, that I have good adhesive on that section. So I'm putting lots of on the back. And then you're just going to tear off the protective cover and we are going to flip it over and attach it to the card. And it takes a minute here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm going to fold back the glue that's hanging over the edge, the tape, and you want to line it up with the bottom part of the card. You don't want that white showing, or it's not going to look nice at all. So make sure that the bottom of that blue layer of the village is covering the white at the bottom of the card, and then check your sides to make sure that you're not going to cut off a building in a really weird position. For example, I'm trying to save the chimney on the left-hand side in the top left-hand corner, that light blue chimney. So I'm happy with where I am. I've got everything lined up the way I want. Now you want to take a really good sharp pair of scissors and you want to trim off the edge. And it's heavy duty cutting because in some places you're going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 layers of cardstock, and it's been covered in the paper glitz, so it's extra thick. But doesn't that make a cool village at the bottom? I just love it. And there's so much bling going on. Doesn't it look like everybody's asleep and waiting for Santa? If only they knew that he's just left. So I'm attaching this to a white card base, and the cut is 7.5 by 8 3/4. And on the 7.5 side, you're going to score it at 3 3/4, and it gives you a nice edge around the card. So I wanted to point out a couple of sentiments that you could use. You could take this Merry Christmas and you could die cut it out, and then cut off the bottom piece, and you could just tuck it in behind your village. Of course, you might want to paper glitz it first so that it blends in with the village. I think that looks kind of cool there. And if that doesn't really float your boat, then maybe consider one of the stamp sets. Joyous Noel would be a good one to, I'm thinking, with lots of sentiments on it, and you could stamp it inside. There's a couple of nice sentiments there that would fit beautifully right inside the card. Finally, we need to add a few little stars to the sky, and I'm using the beautiful Sands of Time gem mixes from Picket Studios. These things are beautiful. They're faceted just like diamonds. They're not just round, and they really, they're glitzy. They're just fabulous. And I dug out the white ones and added them to the sky, and again used my Barely glue to attach them down. Just the perfect amount of bling for this card, I think. So it takes a few minutes to glue them all down, but hey, it's worth it. When your friend opens this card, they're going to be absolutely blown away. There we go, got them all glued down. Doesn't that just look like a night sky with Santa on his way? So here's the finished card, and I hope you will enjoy creating it as much as I did. I have listed all the products I used under the video with links over to the Picket Studios shop. And here's a quick look at the A2 size card too. So exactly the same, just a little bit wider, a little bit shorter, and only 3 layers for the village. Hope you enjoyed the video today, and until next time, toodles!